现场迎接的人群也是他的唱歌唱直播。莫晚舟是人民艺术现在是世界上人的推手之一。我们也了解到了莫晚舟女士要在机场做核酸采样，然后就要前往隔离完成隔离流程。现场情况是非常了解的。现在看到在中国旅程的模样。早早等候在这里的出发车，那么莫晚舟女士在她打完之后，就登上出发车，她首先呢要在这里完成核酸采样，然后上回车上回医院，后续还要完成一系列防疫的流程。在现场我们也听到迎接的人群继续在高唱着歌唱中国。相信这抹中国红也是今天在深圳宝安国际机场让人难忘的颜色。而欢迎回家是今天在机场让人难忘的关键词。
哎呀，这个皮太涩了。
如果信念有颜色，那一定是中国红。虽然回家的路是曲折的，但是归途。
欢迎进来，小伙伴。
今天晚上我们感受到的不仅仅是暖意，还有力量。而那一抹中国红，是我们每一个中国人心头的依靠，心头的堡垒，也是我们心头的信念。接下来，我们还是继续跟杨宇先生来分享这样一个特别让人难忘，也特别让人热泪盈眶的时刻。尤其是在我们伟大祖国的生日即将到来之前，我想今天晚上的这抹深圳宝安机场中国红，一定是感动了我们无数的人。
Moments. She said she never grew up in this dark moments in her life, but it was actually also a very unique experience, I can say, because rarely one individual space can be connected so closely, so tightly with her country or his country. And so I think after this issue, this whole event of accusation against Ms. Mo Wanzhou and the fact that she has not pleaded guilty, Ms. Mo Wanzhou and the soldiers and her country will become more united more than ever. Zhou Yuan.
And so, Ray, what do we know about what's next on the schedule for Miss Mom? She will be heading for quarantine, but what do we know about her plans after? Will she be returning to work anytime soon? Will she take a break? What do we know?
Hello， 卡不卡？能不能看得流畅？信号不好。
In fact, we don't know much about that part of the plan because right now people's focus still on the preventive and control measures against the pandemic. What do we know at the scene is that she just finished, I believe she just finished a duplicate test at the bus, and now they're transporting her to the quarantine hotel.
不是有老外在说话，主播那个在看那个孟晚舟的现场直播呢。那个电视台是在向各个国在做翻译。这也是那个主播为什么上线晚了一点点原因。下午的时候不跟你们说是10点钟上线吗？刚才一直在看新闻呢，在看那个电视的现场直播。你们没有在看吗？
I think she really spoke her heart. She talks about the motherland. She talks about her as you said, motherland. I think it really moved lots of people to tears. This is exactly the moment when the whole nation of 1.4 billion people plus have been waiting for more than 1,000 days. And I think she vindicated herself, she vindicated Huawei's case, and she was so forward-looking, and she was so shining, even though it's almost midnight right now in Shenzhen, and she was so inspiring, I think. She will be a model for lots of people in China going forward, especially for the younger generation, and lots of people will look up to her. You asked, about her authority. I think China is very strict. China treated everyone, including more and so.
啊，你也在看。我觉得看的小伙伴都是爱国的，有些人可能是。
I suppose she will resume work. She probably has been waiting for this moment to start work again with Huawei for all these 1,000 days plus. And that will be another day of great joy for the staff and the management officers of Huawei. They have been waiting for her to come back all these days, yes.
Yeah. Quite an impressive speech there. I find her always being composed in front of camera, but this time was a little bit different. She got a bit emotional for a brief time period. And that to me says a lot about her experience. She said, the past 3 years was quite disruptive to her as a mother, as a wife, as a company executive. And
absolutely. I think she spoke about innovation, and also she must have matured a lot as a person, as a manager, and also as a human being. Because she must have gone through so many up and downs, because what put her in between was not just herself versus the United States or Huawei versus the United States. You were talking about China and the United States plus Canada, all these three countries, two largest economies in the world, and one, Canada, is the second largest country in the world in terms of the land mass, for example. So you're not really talking about being caught up in this tectonic shifts. And many things were beyond her control. What she could have done over the past 1,000 days plus is to keep faith, to persevere, to refuse to give up, and also to cheer herself up, because once she cheered herself up, she cheered the whole nation up.
What do you think will be the focus next for her and for the company at Huawei?
I believe she will strictly abide by the DPA agreement and all the undertakings she has agreed to, because otherwise something wrong may happen in between now and December 1st, 2022. I hope nothing wrong will happen. And then she will assist Huawei as a company to defend itself against the U.S. accusations. That's between the corporate versus the U.S. prosecutor's office going forward. And then going back to her family, seeing all the family members, going back to her best friends. She must have plenty, not only in Shenzhen but throughout China. And also to resume her work, she must have thought about this each of the more than 1,000 days in the past. So every day will be a new beginning for her in the coming days, weeks, months, and probably years.
And do you think the release will help on with development in its overseas markets?
哎，请你们在直播间啊，不要说一些无关的话题，好吧？不然导致直播那个又中断啊。因为你们老是说一些无关的话题，就显示主播那个售卖的一些其他的东西，然后就直接在这儿直接给停播了。你们要么呢就看啊，什么都不卖，卖的也就是小黄车里面的东西，不要在这里问东问西的，好吧？小黄车里有的东西都是卖的，小黄车里没有的都是不卖的啊！不要问。你一会儿问来问去的，平台又以为我那个卖小黄车以外的东西，我啥都没说呢。 你们要看就在那儿安静的看，就别乱说话，别在那儿问问题啊，问东问西的。
She is as much of an angel as you can expect in any human being. And Huawei, I want to tell all my American friends, Huawei is as
主播刚上线
outstanding
15分钟吧，
anywhere in the world.
在一边听着那个孟晚舟回家的现场直播呢。
From your truthful description and labeling of Huawei.
How do you think all of this will be covered by the United States and other Western countries?
Well, first of all, I think the United States probably want to take a low profile right now because they have many other headlines that they need to pay attention to, and they probably want to bury this moment.
谢谢小礼物，就别在这里问东问西啊，说一些无关的话就行。
Reads without too much mentioning of this case because it may not reflect well on the United States. In all honesty, because they were forced into a situation that when they need to drop the extradition case. This actually speaks a lot about the wrong and the misguided nature of the extradition case to start with.
对，我刚才也是一直在听他那个感言，所以说不仅仅是为了这个华为呀，更是中国人的骄傲。其实看着挺感动的。
Or economic relations, their Commerce Secretary has been talking about need to send more senior managers to China, corporate-wise, to talk about China-U.S. cooperation. Hopefully, that will happen.
Hopefully that'll happen. We're gonna have to.
1000多天在国外待着，等于说像是软禁一样。我觉得真的是一种精神上的折磨吧。
Thank you so much for staying with us. And bye for now.
不过还是最终属于苦尽甘来，因为这么长时间外交部不一直在那个社交嘛这块儿在谈判。这双是39吧，我也不知道。不要问小黄车以外的东西，好吧？不要问小黄车以外的东西啊。 因为你们老乱问问题，到时候那个自动断了。
As a mother, a wife, and a company executive.
China's growing global presence has inspired many bright young minds. Wang Hongxiang is a social entrepreneur in his early 30s. His current focus is on improving mutual understanding between his home country and the people of Africa. Through his company, China House, he helps young Chinese people understand what life is like in Africa. Ultimately, the aim is to facilitate China's assumption of a more prominent role in global sustainable development. Huang founded the company in 2014 in the wake of his wildlife protection efforts in southern Africa. His appearance in The Ivory Game, an award-winning documentary, was widely applauded, with Jin Goodall calling him my hero. Wang Hongxiang's vision of employing professional expertise and viable business practices to make the world a better place has its origins in Have you had any identities from the documentary to wildlife protection? So what is the best way to introduce yourself?
Well, I would say my name is Hong. I'm the founder of China House, a social enterprise to integrate China into global sustainable development through youth engagement. That I would say I would put it as my first identity. Besides that, I'm an independent researcher. I'm an investigator on wildlife trade. China House is my first identity.
What do you do with China House? Sustainability, but this is a company.
Well, China House is a social enterprise Chinese people to the global south, to Africa, to Latin America, to Southeast Asia, and so on, to do research regarding sustainable development, and then to do conservation and community development projects.
Is it a charity organization?
No, it's a social enterprise, which means you use a business model for a social objective.
A steel company.
No,
给大家展示的那个小黄车里没有啊，有需要的话，在小黄车里选购。所以希望大家在直播间啊，不要问这个无关的问题，好吧？你们要是问那些无关问题问多了，这个就直接禁播了啊，直接掉线。
So she was telling me that, how do you know that in my country we have so many Chinese people? They're here damaging our environment and so on. I was very surprised. My first reaction was, there's a country called Ecuador? So, I'm sorry for my ignorance. At that time, I knew nothing about Latin America at all.
Right.
So, I got very interested into this topic. So, I went to Ecuador in my winter break. I did research to understand the situation of Chinese business in Ecuador, all the kind of like communication issues that Chinese companies run into when they are traveling overseas.
So, what did you find out? I mean, is that Chinese and Chinese companies really destroying their environment?
Well, so when I was actually there in Ecuador, I was very surprised at what I saw, because I saw, wow, there are so many Chinese people there. They're running restaurants, shops, and so on, mining, and so on. So on one hand, I saw a lot of economic development that's related to China's contribution there. On the other hand, I saw there were some social and environmental conflicts that were related to China there as well. So at that time, there was one Chinese company, they were doing a mining project in Ecuador, and in the eyes of the Chinese company, they thought this project, with this project, they are coming here to help local people, because they are going to help local people with economic development. Employment, infrastructure, economic development, and so on. But in the eyes of a lot of local NGOs, especially environmental NGOs, indigenous groups, and so on, they were concerned that this project is going to destroy the environment, it's going to damage the livelihood of indigenous communities, and so on. What's more, what I realized is that there's a huge communication gap between the Chinese company and the local communities and NGOs. Because I talked to them both, and I realized they knew very little about their own Chinese media called Southern Weekly. And the article was talking about the issue, like the environmental challenge of Chinese company in Ecuador, and also the communication gap between Chinese.
欢迎进来，小伙伴们。有需要那个东西啊，在那小黄车里自己去挑选。小黄车里挂的都是有现货的啊。小黄车里挂的都是有现货的，欢迎进来，小伙伴们。
Since his childhood, Wang Hongxiang has been attached to the more far-flung parts of the world. After investigative forays around Latin America, in late 2013.
自己去那个小黄车里去选购啊，在这里就不一一介绍了。然后我觉得小黄车里的价格也不是很贵啊，所以也不要跟我讨价还价。
CGTN. After your trip to Latin America, what happened?
After my trips to Latin America, which means my trip to Ecuador, Peru, and Brazil, then I graduated from Columbia University.
Okay. Naturally speaking, you'll find a job either.
小黄车里的东西都是全新的啊，都是保证质量的。
But at that time, I was, well, first I want to say I did get some job opportunity in US and back in China.
Okay.
But I didn't want to stay in US, and neither do I want to go back to China.
Okay. There is a third choice.
No, I haven't been to Africa yet.
Okay.
And at that time, luckily, I found out that there's a university in South Africa called this university.
Right.
There was a project there called Africa-China Reporting Project, which essentially sponsored Chinese journalists to go to Africa to do reporting. And at that time, in 2013, they were finding one Chinese journalist to go to South Africa to do 3 months investigation about wildlife conservation, wildlife trade.
That's exactly what you wanted to do.
Yes, I got that opportunity.
Investigation in wildlife.
Yes.
Wildlife protection.
So at the end of 2013, I went to South Africa, and then I stayed there for 3 months. I traveled in South Africa, I go to Mozambique and Namibia. So I was doing my investigation about ivory and wildlife trade in South Africa.
You went to your investigation.
Yes.
Well, you invest ivory trafficking.
Yeah.
So how did you do it, and what exactly did you do?
At the very beginning, I knew nothing about conservation, this topic of illegal wildlife trade in Africa. I knew nothing about it. So I began to talk to different people like the conservation NGOs and so on, got to learn about the subject. And then later on, I went to some of the ivory market in South Africa. For example, I went to the ivory market in Maputo, the capital of Mozambique. And at those kind of markets, I was just chatting with the traders to find what's going on.
So what did you want to investigate about?
I wanted to know what's going on, and is there anything I can help? So I went to look at the impact and so on. And then as a journalist, I wrote articles. That's it.
You wanted the story.
Yeah, I wanted the story. I wanted to find out what's going on.
I mean, if you go back one step, say, if you're just curious about Africa, it was because Africa was the continent you've never been to, then you could just go take a look, and if you wanted to find a job, it could be a tour guide or anything. You didn't have to do something. It was not dangerous. Later you found out, but it was kind of dangerous.
But to be honest, like when I was considering like doing one thing or another thing, whether it's dangerous is not really my first consideration. Whether it's interesting and whether it's meaningful, that matters to me more. After 3 months of investigation, I published some articles, some in Chinese in China, some in English in Africa, and then later on, because some international NGOs, they saw my articles, so they approached me and they wanted me to help them with their further investigation. Not investigation as a journalist, but investigation to help them with law enforcement and so on.
主播在放着电视啊，在看孟晚舟那个现场直播。
So they told me that they were doing some anti-trafficking investigation in which they would have someone who pretend they are buyers of ivory and so on. And then they would seduce the traders to bring ivory and rhino home to see you. And when they come to see you, the police will show up and arrest them.
And then that, I would say, would be dangerous, because you would be destroying their interest, you would be harming their interest.
That, to be honest, I was quite scared to do that at the very beginning, because that was much more dangerous than just being a journalist. You go out and you look and then you write and then you go away. It was more dangerous than that.
But you did it, still did it.
Yeah, after some consideration.
What did you consider?
At the very beginning, I was quite scared, but so I was thinking about whether I should do that or not. But then there were several motivations that made me make the decision of being part of it. First, as I said before, I'm an environmentalist, so I really want to do something to help conservation, to help animal protection. That was my childhood dream. And at that moment, I realized there's something that I can do to actually make some small contribution. So I would not like to turn that down. Second, at that time, I already knew that China was one of the biggest ivory markets in the world. So the ivory trade in Africa is related to China. And then I feel like as a Chinese person, I have to do something. If China is part of the problem, China has to be part of the solution. That's what I would feel like as a Chinese person. Lastly, at that time, I would still consider myself as a journalist. I just cannot resist the temptation to go deeper into the story.
Wang Hongxiang's work has been recognized by his fellow conservationists. During the production of the Ivory Game, he played a key role as non-camera investigator. The Oscar shortlisted documentary featured him with his face unblurred. This courageous display impressed many people and countered some prejudiced perceptions of China.
Images may appear to be identical,
discovered. There are always different sides to a story. We put your focus on the details. To see more, to understand better. See GTN. See the difference.
And not only that was the evidence, that was the footage for a final documentary.
Which I didn't know at the very beginning.
You did?
I didn't. So when I started to help the NGO with the investigation at the end of 2013, and in 2014, there was one time, like one of the NGO partner I was working with, he introduced me to that documentary maker. Yes.
没有加粉丝牌的啊，赶紧去加粉丝牌。
Documentary.
Which I didn't know at the beginning as well.
Yeah.
So I still remember he was very excited when he saw me in 2014. So he told me that he was making a documentary about elephant conservation and ivory trade and so on. And he told me that like internationally there was a lot of documentary about this topic. But if you look into those kind of topics, the narrative is always like the white people doing investigation, the white people, the African people, the black people, they are the ones doing the black people, and Chinese people are the ones who are buying ivory. So that's the good elephant. They're the worst people. So they told me that he was actually a documentary that is different, that's more complicated and more complicated to show us what's going on actually with the ivory trade and the conservation of elephants. Because he believes that only after we really understand what's going on, we can do something to help improve, to help solve the problem.
So not only you took the hidden camera, but in the end you did the stand-ups, the explaining part of the documentary.
But at the beginning, that was not the plan of the documentary maker. So at the very beginning, he was offering me that, don't worry, we'll just blur your face and so on, because he would consider my safety after doing that documentary. But at the end, it was my decision to say that, you know, if you want me to be part of your documentary, I would make my face easier.
Okay.
I would like to just be
Why is that? Why is that important to you?
Maybe because my background was journalism and communication and so on. So I believe this power of story. And after I did a lot of investigation in South America and Africa, I saw there's a huge communication gap between China and the outside world. Both sides know so little about each other. There was so much misunderstanding. For example, regarding conservation, elephant conservation and ivory trade. There are so many non-Chinese people who believe all Chinese people buy ivory. And there are so many Chinese people who believe ivory is just a topic used by those anti-China NGOs to attack China. I would like to try to do something to reduce the communication gap.
And you wanted to show up in front of the camera,
Exactly.
tell the truth, the story yourself, to convey the message yourself.
Exactly. So my thought was that, so if I could be inside this documentary, the real Chinese people with a voice and the non-Chinese people watch this documentary and they would know not all Chinese are those ivory buyers and so on. There are Chinese conservationists as well. So we can engage Chinese people and work together for conservation.
Did you achieve that?
I achieved that.
You did.
I did.
And the response you got
Very
from your peers.
It was wonderful. So there were so many times later on, after 2016, after the documentary was out, I was invited to a lot of screening events all over the world to talk about the Ivy Game documentary and so on. And there were so many times I met a lot of foreigners. They were telling me that you changed my perception about China and conservation and so on and so on.
How did you feel about that?
I feel that was wonderful. It was wonderful because I was changing the stereotype. It was sad because the stereotype is just so big. So, but I would use that as an opportunity, and then I would use those opportunities to explain to the non-Chinese people that yes, China was the biggest ivory market in the world, but no, not all Chinese people buy ivory. Actually, the Chinese people who actually buy ivory would be less than 1% of the population. There are so many Chinese people who are just like me. They care about environment, they care about animals, they want to do something for conservation as well.
And then you got into this area, got to meet people, all these environmentalists or conservationists, like including Jane Goodall.
Yes.
What did she say to you about your job?
The first time I met Dr. Jane Goodall was in 2017, something like that. There was one time, one common friend of us told me that Jane Goodall would like to see me. So he wanted to bring me to Hong Kong, where Jane Goodall was doing a fundraising event, so that I can actually visit Jane and see her.
什么打麻将了？你打麻将了？
so she went to the stage, and everyone was like applauding and so on. So she started speaking, and then at some point she was saying that today there's someone I want to introduce him to you all. He is my hero and so on and so on. And then she was like, Hong, where are you? Hong, where are you? And then I don't know how to say, but okay, I just went up there.
So it was like you were introduced by Jean Goodall, and she's really the figure in conservation, right? I mean, she's been doing that for decades. So what does it mean for you? I mean, does it bring any changes out of your personal life, to your career?
That was very inspiring for me, because you met someone, you met a tribal hero, and not only that you meet her, but you feel like she recognizes you, she supports you, she likes you.
Yeah, acknowledges what you did.
Yes. So that was totally very inspiring for me.
Wang Hongxiang didn't rest on his laurels. In 2014, he embarked on an ambitious new endeavor by setting up China House. The company's aim is to inspire young Chinese people and teach them how to engage with the wider world. Mutual understanding, Wang believes, is essential for bridging the gulf in communication.
Images may appear to be identical, but looks can be deceiving. The difference isn't always obvious. It has to be discovered. There are always different sides to a story. We put the focus on the details. To see more, see perspective, see detail, see brilliance.
So again, if we go back to the very beginning, this is the second step. We went to Latin America, and this is the first to Africa, the two continents. You wanted to
每天主播没有固定的时间直播啊，直播时间都比较随意的，基本上是如果晚上时间的话，都是晚上9点或者10点直播。当然，我那天其实几点播的？12点多吧播了。我看还有不少人呢。我以为大家睡觉都挺好。
You know how difficult it is and how rare it is to get you as a Chinese investigator working on this topic internationally. So why do you want to ruin like an opportunity like that?
You wanted to make a name for yourself?
No, it was not about that. And actually, to be honest, giving up doing investigation as a career was quite difficult for me. First, the pay was fine. It's not like many people would have imagined. A lot of the time I got paid, and the pay is quite okay. Working with international organizations, and also it's very interesting for me, and it's very like meaningful for me that kind of career. The only sad thing for me regarding that kind of career is only that the impact is not big enough. The impact is not big enough.
Because you were disappointed about the impact.
Yes, because I realized there's so many conservation issues all over the world, and if me alone, I was doing even so. Okay, if I keep doing investigation and arresting and so on, even as I do that for my whole life, I can like arrest how many people? 100? 200? That's nothing compared to the whole world. I'm not satisfied with the impact that I could make. That's the reason I decided to move on to China House.
That's the link.
Yes,
That's the missing part.
Yes.
So when you decided to run this company, this is social identity company, so the mission was to you try to raise the awareness of the public to know the importance of this.
No, let me put it this way. First, when I was doing my research in Africa and South America, I realized in those continents there are a lot of NGOs, and a lot of the NGOs are Western background NGOs. And I saw a lot of people from Europe, from America, even from Japan, Korea, and so on, working in those organizations. I almost didn't see any Chinese NGOs. And I think that is a missing link, because NGO is very important as a link between government, companies, and the local community and other NGOs and so on. So that's one thing I saw. The second thing I
I saw is that so at the end of 2013, I came back to China, and I was invited by many people and many universities as well to give some talks. So I was sharing my experience in Beijing, Shanghai, Guangzhou, and then I realized that many young Chinese people were they're interested in going to those.
没有加粉丝牌的啊，赶紧去加一个粉丝牌。欢迎进来小伙伴。
They didn't know how. They didn't know how to get there, just like me before. So that's the second thing I saw. The third thing I saw is that I realized China is now all over the world. We are really like everywhere around the whole world. In all those countries that I have never heard of, there are so many Chinese people there. But the communication gap is huge between the Chinese people and the non-Chinese people. And I realized non-Chinese people like myself could play a very unique role.
一直点点你们右下角的啊屏幕啊，给主播多点点那个。现在是什么？小心心还是什么？之前都是爱心啊，现在出来都是什么呀？
So then we can somehow create a bridge between China and the outside world.
Huang Hongxiang's example and influence have fostered a new mindset among some young Chinese people. In addition to doing volunteer work, they are seeing the value of research, investigation, and professional expertise in serving the public good and making development more sustainable. Personal accounts of remarkable people, visionaries who see the world in a different way, celebrities who open their mouths and share their secrets. Life stories to inspire you with Icon on CGTN. So now you bring young people, young Chinese people, to see the world, to see what is happening in Africa, in Latin America. At the same time, you're also sharing with them your understanding of this public good career cause. How do you will understand it? And probably in the future, some of them are also going to do what you do.
Exactly.
Do you have any future, I mean, what is your mission? I mean, what exactly in the end that you want to achieve?
Well, regarding what you just said, what we do now, what we actually do a lot in our educational program is exactly sharing the concept, well, I would say the international concept of public good to young Chinese people. Because in China, a lot of the time when we're thinking about going to Africa or when we're thinking about animal protection and so on, we're thinking about volunteer. So we go there to do volunteer as if NGO public good is only about volunteer doing some work.
It's part of the way of doing it. One way of doing it.
I would say it may not be the best mindset or the best way for us to think about.
主播再过15分钟啊，下线。那个11点15分，因为主播今天是10点15分上线的吧？啊，正常1个小时。
In fact, at Columbia, when a lot of my classmates, when they went to Africa and so on, they were not going there for volunteering. They went there to do research, to understand the situation.
主播再过15分钟下线啊。
And after this very solid research, they understood the situation and then design ideas and
欢迎进来，小伙伴们。
That's the way internationally people believe public good. This can be
没有加粉丝牌的啊，赶紧加一个主播的粉丝牌。
The changes that you plan to achieve with this young people, is it happening?
Oh, we saw a lot of this happening. So, like a lot of the young Chinese people, after our program, they learn a lot about this NGO work, which I would say is more precise compared to public good. Like they understand what is NGO, they understand what is the professional way of doing like sustainable development and so on, and they got some skills. And eventually, after a few years, we saw some of our students, they went into international organizations, they went into NGO, or they started their own organization that's similar to China House, and they were doing their own things. We saw a lot of this that was happening over the past few years.
Yeah, and then if we go back to the very early question, what would be
my vision is, well, there's a comparison that I would say is not very precise. But I always say I wish China House one day to become
主播今天11点15分下线啊！你们要是没赶上的就没赶上了，因为主播今天下午也跟你们说了，晚上10点钟左右上线。对不对？主播也就是看了一下那个孟晚舟的现场直播，晚了15分钟才上线。诺诺当年新闻还没看，没事儿，可以看那个回播啊，反正电视都有重播。谢谢小礼物，谢谢小礼物啊，谢谢大家小礼物。有需要买东西的啊，小伙伴自己在购物车里选购一下啊，购物车里有的都是可以售卖的啊，都有保证质量的。
Begin this hour with breaking news. Huawei's chief financial officer Meng Wanzhou has arrived back in China. The chartered passenger plane carrying the executive along with Chinese diplomats touched down at Shenzhen International Airport.
主播没有每天都会直播啊，没那么多时间。有空了就给大家播一下。
In 2018, Meng was arrested in Vancouver at the request of the U.S. on fraud charges. They accused her of misleading banks into processing transactions for the Chinese giant that breached American sanctions against Iran. She denies the allegations and has been out on bail with her movement restricted. Meng's return has been getting a lot of praise from people online in China. Her half-sister, Annabelle Yao, posted on the Chinese platform Weibo, sharing her happiness at seeing the family reunited and thanking the Chinese government. Meng's return is big news here. It's become one of the top 4 stories on Weibo with nearly 10 million searches. Many Chinese
欢迎进来的小伙伴，主播还有14分钟啊，下线。
Also, the Chinese graphic artist Wu Qilin shared a piece depicting her return as a national rescue from what he sees as monstrous U.S. charges. News about Meng has also gained traction on Twitter, with some sharing their best wishes for her return, others criticizing Canada for detaining the executive. Meng's release does appear to resolve criminal charges against her that stretch back for several years. Canadian authorities arrested her in December of 2018 as she was catching a connecting flight to Mexico for business meetings. The U.S. wanted her extradited to face charges that she misled banks in a bid to get around American sanctions. Beijing called the charges politically motivated and demanded her immediate release. On December the 11th, she was released on a $10 million bail. Under the condition, she was given an electronic tag, but was allowed to travel around much of Vancouver. Several weeks later, the U.S. Department of Justice formally leveled criminal charges against Meng. And in March, it gave the formal go-ahead for the extradition case to proceed. Multiple hearings then followed.
下午上班的时候还能看直播呢。
After reaching an agreement with the American government over a deferred prosecution. The U.S. extradition request was dropped, as were Meng's bail conditions, allowing her to leave Canada. Well, some have questioned the motives.
没有，这个季节室外播有点凉，而且今天天气不是很好，今天是那个下雨天，所以比较凉。看看吧，后面几天到时候找一个晴天的时候。
美方的反应是什么呢？他们的回馈是什么呢？
他们跟我们
一般刷抖音不都是看小视频吗？你们有些人刷抖音是直接刷直播的吗？
也就是说，到2016年，美国开始调查华为这个时间点，在此之前，华为并没有在合规的问题上得到美国有关方面的警告啊，或者说这个要求你们改，或者是更加合规的这样一些提示。U.S. Commerce Secretary William Roberts that Huawei was being compliant.
As of the moment, I don't believe that our department has found any violations of Huawei.
However, 8 months later, the U.S. made a completely different
欢迎进来，小伙伴们！没有加粉丝牌的啊，赶紧去加粉丝牌。
For years, Chinese firms have broken our export laws and undermined sanctions.
主播还有10分钟就下线了啊！
U.S. financial systems to facilitate their illegal activities. This will end. Trump administration continues to be tougher on those who violate our sanctions and our export control laws than any administration in history.
Why the U-turn?
Obviously, this came from the very top. You have a statement by Donald Trump saying that this is a card that he intended to use in his trade negotiations.
For what will certainly be the largest trade deal ever made, that would certainly intervene in what is necessary.
This extradition request is based on the enforcement by the United States of its unilateral sanctions against Iran, to try to force Iran to renegotiate the nuclear deal. These are not United Nations sanctions, they are U.S. sanctions. Canada doesn't agree in terms of foreign policy with its strategy. Furthermore, these proceedings are conveniently addressed against the commercial competitors of some U.S. interests. So there is a lot of good reasons to look at this case with suspicion.
This is not a game of go fish. Okay? The idea that we are supposedly civilized, more civilized than today than we were in the past. How is that possible when in essence he's kidnapped her? He's holding her for ransom against her father and the Chinese government and her own liberty for his own political gain.
The sanctions in the act are clear. There are no conditions qualifications. Can the government do something? You say it certainly can. They have the legal authority, always respecting the rule of law and the independence of the court. To intervene now and stop this extradition proceeding.
In the building where Mabel used to work, there's a library which she thinks of. The entrance, a guest book, caught my attention. Many employees left messages for her so she could know. One such message reads, one job, literally translated to a great phone which she is, please, soon.
Well, let's get over to our report.
主播还有6分钟下线啊！
In Shenzhen, she's at the airport there. So tell us more about Mom's arrival. What did she say?
Yeah, so she just gave a very patriotic speech. She mentioned she highlighted the bond actually between her and her country, and also that kind of emotion ignited the passion and also the crowd at the airport just now. She also mentioned she used the dark moments to describe her life in the past 3 years in Vancouver. And I believe that if it's not the supporters and also the country behind her have become the cornerstone of her life in the past 3 years. Now let's hear more in detail what she said.
艰难、方险、容易。Difficulties are hard shaped, make me strong.
the difficulties, twists and turns, and also the perseverance and hard work will be translated to the power for us moving forward.
Go back in China, crowds here cheering for her arrival. Give us an idea of how people there are reacting to this news.
In fact, many, I have interviewed a few of them after Ms. Mo's arrival. Many of the people at the crowd, they have tears in their eyes. I feel that they see the return of Ms. Mo to home as the return to the justice to Chinese people, and they all through this event of Ms. Mo in the past 3 years, the crowd said many of the supporters actually said that in fact we have a strong country, so the country will always be there to support you and to protect its citizens.
All right, Lucy Ray.
Back to you.
Yeah, Lucy Ray, live for us in Shenzhen. Thank you so much for being there. You're watching World Today on CGT and more after this short break.
主播马上下线了啊！主播马上还有事情要出去，主播再播2分钟下线啊！